afternoon, and welcome to the latest installment of Power Huddle, Inside the Minds of ESG Gurus. I am Heidi Friedman, a partner and co-chair of Thompson Hine's ESG Collaborative. During this monthly series, I chat one-on-one with innovative ESG execs. These unscripted discussions will examine how these company execs from various industries are actively paving the way as ESG trendsetters in championing pragmatic ESG strategies to align with business values while building a sustainability framework to advance their company's ESG goals and practices. And I have a guru for you today. Today, I have Effie Silva, the Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary of Fresh Del Monte Products, Inc. There, she leads legal, corporate governance, and trade compliance functions. I don't know when you sleep, but we can talk about that. With 20 years of experience in global law firms, she has advised corporate leaders on governance, regulatory matters, M&A, and international disputes. She's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of International Arbitration and a board-certified expert in international litigation and arbitration. She holds leadership roles in multiple arbitration organizations and is an NACD Certified Director and a member of the Latino Corporate Directors Association. Welcome, Effie. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for that nice introduction. So good to be with you, Heidi.
And actually, I haven't been this excited for a conversation in a while just because we're at such an interesting time. So this is going to be a fun one, but
it is.
Just a few things, housekeeping matters before we get started. Today's program is being recorded as usual and will be available on our library of recordings on Thompson Hine's YouTube channel and later on our Environmental Laws podcast. This presentation is intended for general information of individuals and organizations on matters of general interest. The thoughts and opinions being expressed today are those of the individual panel members only and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the panel members' clients, employers, affiliates, or Thompson Hine. The content should definitely not be taken as advice, as the views expressed are for informational purposes only. If you have questions and comments, though, please join us by adding those comments into the chat. Please put your chat to Heidi Friedman, and I'll try to get to as many of those questions or comments as I can during our short time together. So let's get started. Let's get started with you, Effie. You obviously have this super broad position and you have ESG under your umbrella and all of these things. Tell us a little bit about your ESG journey, where it started and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so really it started when I went in-house about 6 or 7 years ago. And I first joined Tyson Foods. And at Tyson Foods, I led the sustainability from the legal side, the legal function. And so that was my tip of the toe into the pool of sustainability. And it was a really exciting time. This is back in 2018. And now, if you compare that time to what we're going through now, it's a completely different ballgame. And I would say that I've always led sustainability from a global perspective. And I think that's really important. I'm an international junkie. You know, like if you were to confine me to the United States or even to North America, I probably would be bored to tears. So my experience at Tyson Foods led to me joining Cargill. And at Cargill, I was actually in Kansas, so not too far from you, Midwest.
Yes.
I also was heavily involved on the legal side on sustainability efforts. And that was interesting because Cargill is a much more international company, even though it's private, as opposed to Tyson Foods, which was a public company. And then I made my journey to Fresh Del Monte, where, sustainability, and we'll get into this, is really the fabric of the organization. It's basically, think of it as a huge farming community, right? We are agriculturalists, and we've been in this industry for over 100 years. So sustainability is actually at the core of the company, and it's the telling of that story of sustainability and how we've done it throughout the years, and then folding it into metrics for the street, right? Like in our reporting is really the evolution. So that's a little bit about me and how I got into it. And plus,
and I love your emphasis on international, because first of all, you can tell that from your bio clearly. So maybe we have some good travel trips we could talk about off camera. But what I really am been intrigued about on my ESG journey is really, for example, that Europe is so much farther ahead than we are on these things and really driving what's going on in the US, both then and now. And we basically have California and Europe, and then right now this big blank in between. So how are you yourself looking at what's going on with CSRD, even that shifting with the omnibus stuff and all of that? Like, how are you looking at compliance right now? Because we have state mandates and European mandates for global companies and sort of a very large step back in the United States otherwise.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think actually the US trend of really not stepping into the CSRD like foray and sustainability metrics is kind of bleeding into Europe now, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you know, like you just said, the European Commission just published an omnibus package that is proposing some major changes
Mm-hmm.
just last month, and it could significantly affect our EU reporting,
Yeah.
not only on CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, but also the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive,
Yeah.
and you think about it too, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, right? The CBAM, all these acronyms could
That's the one good thing about
cause,
environmental law and
yeah.
ESG. There's more acronyms than you could possibly ever know.
So, we are preparing for CSRD as stated from the European Union, and we're moving forward with a global reporting. Now that may be delayed, likely to be delayed a 2 year trajectory for us. But regardless, I think the thought behind it was that the SEC, we have to have California compliance, we have to have SEC compliance, we have to have global compliance, in the EU. And so therefore, let's just wrap it up into one report. And have that be our like standard compliance report to be able to report out to all these different countries and different taxonomies of regulation around the world. It's an extremely expensive sport to be in.
Yes.
And it's, but the silver lining in it is that you're able to tell your story and your metrics and really what you're doing in these communities that you operate. So behind the beast of it, I think, is a really important thing for stakeholders and for community members. Like, forget about shareholders, just even in the communities that we operate, like
Right.
to show that we're doing good, I think is
Right. Yeah, and CSRD and CSDD, as you know, they're so much broader than just the climate stuff, which really brings in all of these
totally.
things. I mean, I think you raised a huge, really important point, which the one thing I've heard often is so many clients are underestimating the cost to be able to comply. And now I have, the consultants are making out on this,
Oh
at the
my
big
gosh,
four
yes.
accounting firms. I mean, luckily I've found some really good, strong consultants that I feel good about recommending to clients to help them work through this. But it's really, kind of this new, very large book of business that they're able to develop just to provide this kind of support. So, or if not, you have to build an in-house team.
Heidi, I was going to tell you that I find this era of like the software and the different outside consultants that can help you with the sustainability metrics to be very akin to the e-discovery days when,
Oh, that's a good analogy. I like
yes,
that. Okay, I'm going to steal that if that's okay. That's a good analogy.
yeah, where there was like no true like relativity platform, for example. There was no
Right.
true software that could help you, guide you. Um, you know, for example, like you have to do for the CSRD, you have to do you have to implement double materiality assessment.
Right.
You have to, think about your IROs, your impacts, risks, and opportunities. And all this requires like heavy lift, not only from the business, but you need to have like outsourced software to be calculating this for you. And then the CSRD, the European Union wants you to tag it, XR, I can't remember the acronym, but it's basically like linking in your document
Right.
the metrics so that it's visible and electronically viable. So the issue with that is that since it's a free-for-all, you really do need to have folks or consultants that have deep experience, at least with delivering those kind of metrics prior to this time period. I mean, that's what we're looking for, and that, you know, we've been able to secure. But a lot of people are getting into the game, and I'm afraid that it's not like deeply rooted in intellectual knowledge as to what exactly you need to report out on. And that's why you need attorneys too, frankly.
100%. And, you know, like I feel like everyone and their mothers become an ESG data, you know, expert or consultant. But, you know, on some level, if anyone tells you they're an expert, it's not true, because it's a new, I mean, you can't. Now, some of us are definitely studying and reading and learning and trying to do more, but I really, you know, think that there's no way to even be an expert. Now, that being said, I've sat on 9 zillion, you know, you know, everyone wants to sell us something so we can sell
Right.
it to our clients, and, you know, we won't ever sell anything that we don't approve. But, you know, what you're talking about is so important. I think we'll get there in terms of just like relativity is right.
Yeah.
You'll get to the place where we have more confidence in whatever, you know, hardware, software, all of that, but we're still on that journey for sure.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And the one thing I wondered about, how your thoughts were, I feel like clients are even challenged at figuring out if and when we have to report on CSRD. I mean, the reporting that you're talking about is one thing, but that, you know, a very highly complex global company with some subsidiaries in different countries and things, that could be a hard analysis in and of itself. I'm assuming you guys have already gone through all of that.
So you're absolutely right. I mean, we have over 175 subsidiaries, to just give you an example of the breadth of this company in terms of global
Wow.
metrics. So you're right on point. I think we've gone through the double materiality and we're in process. It's really and we were targeting to go forward next year with our report, but now with
Mhm.
the delay, probable delay, you know, that may change. But, you know, in terms of outside of timing, I think the other metrics that are demanded in CSRD are going to stay, most likely stay. So it's still onerous.
Yes.
And global companies, multinationals, we're all advancing on this because it's obviously a regulatory requirement.
Yeah, well, I can tell you're a thought leader on this. Tell me, as you said, Freshtel Monte has been a leader in sustainability forever. It's part of your framework for sure.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit of how it's evolved over the last, let's say, 10 years?
Yeah, I would say that first of all, when our sustainability report, I think it precedes my coming on board. I've been here for 3 years, but right when sustainability reports were in vogue or actually happening, we put ours together, and we've been doing that for the last, I think, over 7 years, and
Okay.
it's been very good. But I think what we are seeing now is that it's not so much the softness of it, right? The feel good of what you're doing on the environmental side and what you're doing on the social side, but now it's and your governance, but now it's more metric focused, much more detailed in what you're trying to reach. And there are, you know, so the evolution would, I would say, to be very blunt, would be like soft sustainability report to more California regimented scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. And then now the evolution to a global like EU CSRD type not shareholder, a sustainability report. Now, whether that evolution is now going to be a fourth evolution into no longer having a sustainability report, which we'll get into in a little bit, and just really just folding that into your 10K or your 10Q, or if you're a private company, your financial reports. That's something to be seen, and I think actually that's where we're going with all the greenwashing claims that are out there, and plaintiffs using sustainability reports as their fodder, as their evidence, alleged evidence for your wrongdoing, right? But back to your point, which I think your initial question was, is that this company in particular, like I said at the beginning of this, it's farmers and in communities, far and wide, including Kenya, the Philippines, South America, Central America, growing fruits and vegetables, and really embedded in the nature of that community. And right now, too, we're getting into residues and into recyclables, which is really important on the agricultural side. Like think about fertilizer, where you want it to be regenerative and healthy for the planet. It also helps your yields when you're growing pineapples or bananas and things like that. So just really telling that story outside of a sustainability report and outside of these metrics in legal is very important to the company.
Yeah, you said so many interesting things in there. The one thing I wanted to sort of follow up on is I do feel like the raters and rankers, when we first got into this, it was all about sort of transparency, right? Are you putting something out there and are you saying what you're doing? You didn't have to make sort of actual movement. And then that's changed to, are you actually making movement towards your goals will affect it. And now we're at, like you said, a whole different realm. So that I find that interesting. But let's talk about green hushing just a little bit. I would say that the number one thing that we've seen is clients and companies not necessarily changing their goals, because our recommendation is, and I hope folks are still doing this, what your stakeholders want is what should drive your goals. So your double materiality statement now needs to drive where you're going. And if you have an old one, do a new one, because things do change. But that being said, they're not bragging about it anymore. It's really a green hushing environment because of regulatory, especially, the government contractor folks are, that's a different realm, completely. So what's your view on that? Like, what is your recommendation with all of your knowledge and experience to companies that are kind of struggling with, we're going to remain committed, this is part of our framework, but we may not be saying as much as we used to?
Yeah, I think it's I think this is a complex question. And especially we're 6 weeks into the Trump administration, we're dealing with, regulatory bodies in the EU kind of backpedaling on accountability and the metric finding. What I would say is that, it's almost it's a little bit easier in respects of this company because sustainability has been, like I said, a fabric, a main print, and then not to say that we don't get attacked for our sustainability efforts, but I would say that it's just be transparent be simple, realistic, and transparent in what you're projecting about what your company does. And there's always going to be
simple, realistic, and transparent. I love that. It's very good. Yes. See, SRT, we're going to make our own new thing. I think that's actually, that's brilliant. Let's talk a little bit about another hot topic, which is supply chain. And it looked interesting to me that, the EU's rolling back a little bit about what you have to do with your supply chain. We'll see how that ends up. But what are your current relationships with your supply chain? Are you putting any ESG related mandates on them? Are you responding to ESG related mandates? How is that working up and down your chain?
So we have to, like it is in our vendor code of conduct. It's and also, we're dealing with food, so there's sensitivities around it anyway. So it's highly regulated in that sense. You want like good food to come in, and so our suppliers are usually like other farmers that are with product. So in that sense, I feel like the sustainability story and the metrics and the tenacity of what we're demanding from our suppliers is embedded in our vendor code of conduct. Like basically, you can't do business with us unless you're keeping up with the values that we're upholding for our end client, which are retailers, supermarkets. We're not B2C, we're B2B. So it's consistent down the line. So we demand those of our, you know, and I would say in these third world countries or in these other countries
Mhm.
where it's much more difficult to get those metrics done, it really takes the intentionality of a global supplier of goods to mandate that from their local
Mhm.
smaller players, you know, to have that same accountability. Because the truth is, with FISMA 204 coming into place, where it's farm to fork, like you need to be able to trace that product,
Mhm.
at least in the United States, it's accountability down the chain. Like we need to know exactly the farm that we source the product from, and then how it ended up in front of, you know, Heidi, your plate.
Exactly. Yes, and so and that's something you guys probably have a leg up on because you've probably been doing some of that in the food industry for a longer time than others who may not be in that industry. So,
Yeah, but you know, like I think your point is really important because we have monoliths, you know, that we sell to. Um,
mhm.
think of the biggest retailers that you can think of that deal with food that are requiring the same of us as their
Yeah,
suppliers. And so really it's a top down. And then we haven't even gotten into the fact that some of those big players demand that you go into their software
the
program.
Ecovadas is the SBT,
Yes,
like all of those
thank you.
things. Yeah. Yes.
And that you know, double up your work and you put those metrics in there, you know. So I wish there was a uniform way to do this because all of it is costly, not regulatory driven because those parameters are kind of wacky right now. And
Right.
then it's time consuming, right?
Right.
If you
Yeah.
have to report different metrics to different vendors and also keep your suppliers in line, there has to be some sort of uniformity.
There really does. There's a big hole for that. And I can't tell you how many
Yeah.
clients I talk to who their folks that interface with suppliers or customers are filling out random forms and not running
Yes.
them by anybody. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So, having, if nothing else, having an internal process of how those requests work and how we put those requests out and, that whole thing is just so essential. So
Yeah.
with everything going on right now, what do you think is your biggest personal ESG challenge in the realm that you're working?
I think it's probably what most in-house attorneys are dealing with is that with this administration, the US administration, and with the EU regulations, everything is up in the air. And it's that lack of certainty that in the fluctuation is like you can't plan for it.
Right.
So, in essence, the best thing you can do is just plan for it, expend the capex now, get your ducks in a row, expend the effort in doing it. And then if you have to report less, like good for you. And sorry you had to spend so much money getting to that result. But I think that's the only way to go is like prepare for the worst and then deliver with the time constraints once it's ironed out.
I'm an over preparer, so I like that recommendation. I think that is it's smart. And what we've been counseling clients, frankly, that especially global clients that are doing CSRD, that you might as well do it at a parent level in a way that you can use it for California. Because
Exactly.
otherwise, if you're just reporting on your subs, I mean, sure, you could be compliant, but it's going to be very ad hoc and it could be, more costly, frankly, and inconsistent. People will be confused by that. To me,
Absolutely.
one message across the board is always probably better. So, but you've also had a lot of ESG successes. So do you have a favorite ESG related success?
You know, I would say that one of the greatest things that we do here is that we're really driving towards our human rights policy globally. So I would say that that's one of the successes because in this evolution of ESG, environmental was kind of like the first thing that everybody went for. The regulatories got that down. We had the scope 1 and 2, 3, and Europe on the same page. But the S has always been solved, right? It's the labor laws, the human rights, those types of issues that have now intensified over time. And so I think it's that, I'm really proud of the fact that as a company, we've been able to really concentrate, now that we have the E down, it's concentrate on the S, uh, and really drilling down on human rights and making that, a global report metric that we're really proud of. So I would say that that's how I feel about it.
You have great leadership on that. I've read a ton of great stuff on that, and S is definitely, could be so many things.
It's
I
true.
mean, I always, people ask us, well, is that an S or an E? I mean, sometimes it's overlapping. I mean, with
It is.
environmental justice, that was obviously a thing that was an E and an S. It's still a thing for some people, but not others. But we're working through that. I actually have a very interesting question, and I wonder what your thought is. Are the current trade wars affecting any of your ESG efforts and the collaboration among companies and things like that? Because that is most definitely a hot topic. I know you have some trade responsibility, and is there any interplay between the two that you're seeing right now?
The answer is no,
Okay.
only because we're like 6 weeks into this tariff trade issue.
Yeah.
And yes, there are going to be eventual repercussions. But in terms of trade and pricing, unfortunately, I think, the pricing is going to come down to it's going to go crashing down on the consumer. But in terms of like trade and tariffs affecting the ESG program, I can't see it having a direct correlation, but maybe I'm missing. I mean, have you seen anything in your practice?
What I'm seeing is a lack of communication from some suppliers and some companies where there's kind of aggravation around trade related issues. So I have a lot of clients where we actually do environmental work and trade work and things like that. And they have had, information they need for scope 3 and other things that have been reported, that there's been a stall and other problems because of that kind of thing. So that's where I would say, but only I would say I've seen it 2 different occasions so far, so not a lot. And it could just be like lack of focus, more focus on alternative venues for sale, and it's hard to say what it's attributable to right now. So,
and I would say too, like food kind of gets a pass on a lot of these tariff and trade wars only because it's a necessity.
Right.
And even if you think about trade compliance globally, food is always a general license exception, and most banned countries, like that you can't trade with. So maybe it's less for my type of, I come from a food background, so I'm not seeing it so much.
Yeah, and hopefully that will be true as well. So
yes.
So before I let you go, you have so many hats that you wear at work, and I'm sure in the community and elsewhere, but what do you do for fun when you're not managing all these various complex issues other than sleep? Hopefully.
Yeah, I love spending obviously quality time with my family. I was actually an studio art major, an international relations major at Wellesley College, and so I've tried to keep up with my art painting. And if you looked at my LinkedIn, you'll see I have a little link to my artwork just for fun, because people have
checking that out. That's so fun. I can't wait to see that. I tried during COVID. I ordered all these art supplies and everything, and I painted for 2 weeks, and now they're in the basement somewhere. But that's okay. It was fun for a minute. Oh, I can't wait to see that. Sounds so exciting. So
that's better than my baking bread, and that's all I did was I became a baker. So
there's worse things than painting and baking bread. So I think we did okay, but. True. Honestly, this was so informative. I think your perspective is spot on. You taught me some really great things today, Effie, and I appreciate your insight. Today, this concludes today's discussion. This webinar was recorded and will be available to view in our library recordings on Thompson Hine's YouTube channel and later on the Environmental Laws podcast. We encourage you to visit our YouTube channel and stay subscribed so you can stay up to date. Thank you for attending today's program. And again, a very special thanks to Effie for taking the time to share her wisdom with us today. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.